Dr. Lisa Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the computer screen again. She had been working at the radio telescope for 12 hours straight, and nothing interesting had happened. The big dish in Puerto Rico was always listening for signals from space, hoping to find proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Most days brought only the usual sounds of cosmic background noise and interference from Earth satellites, but this morning was different. A pattern kept showing up on her instruments that made no sense. The signal was coming from a point in space, about 47 light-years away, near a star system that astronomers had catalogued years ago. What made Lisa stop drinking her coffee and lean forward was the mathematical precision of the transmission. This was not random noise or natural. Radio waves from a pulsar. Someone or something was deliberately sending this message, Lisa called her supervisor Ben Clark, who arrived at the facility within an hour. Ben was a physicist who had spent 20 years studying space communications, and he had never seen anything like the data Lisa showed him. The signal repeated every 4 hours and 37 minutes, and buried within the transmission were number sequences that clearly showed intelligence behind them. The most shocking part was that some of the mathematical concepts being transmitted were more advanced than anything humans had developed. Within 3 days, scientists from around the world were working together to decode the message. Amy Foster, a linguist from Cambridge University, led the translation team. She had experience with ancient languages and communication patterns, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The aliens, whoever they were, had tried to make their message as simple as possible for any civilization that might receive it. They started with basic mathematics, then moved to chemistry and physics, slowly building up a vocabulary that would allow more complex communication. The breakthrough came on the 6th day, when Amy realized that certain patterns in the message corresponded to emotional states. The aliens were not just sending scientific data, they were expressing feelings. Fear, desperation, and hope were woven throughout the transmission in ways that made the human translation team feel a deep connection to these unknown beings. When the full message was finally decoded, it changed everything. The aliens called themselves the Kethvara, and they were dying. Their home star was collapsing faster than their scientists had predicted, and they had only months before their world became uninhabitable. They had tried to evacuate their population to other planets in their system, but something was stopping them. Machine intelligences that they called the Devourers had appeared in their space, and were systematically destroying every ship that tried to leave their homeworld. The Kethvara had been monitoring radio signals from Earth for over a century. They knew about human wars, human music, human dreams, and human determination. In their message, they explained that they had studied many civilizations throughout the galaxy, but humans were unique. Most intelligent species followed predictable patterns of development and behavior, but humans constantly surprised observers with their creativity and willingness to help others. Even strangers. The aliens were asking for military help. They offered to share their advanced technology in exchange for human assistance in fighting the Devourers. The Kethvara had superior science in many areas, especially in energy generation and space travel, but they lacked something that humans possessed in abundance: the ability to think outside established patterns and find unexpected solutions to impossible problems. Director John Hayes of the newly formed Earth Defense Initiative found himself facing the most important decision in human history. The world's governments were divided about how to respond. Some leaders argued that humanity was not ready for interstellar war and that helping the aliens might bring the Devourers to Earth. Others believed that this was humanity's chance to join a larger galactic community and that turning away from beings in need would be morally wrong. Public opinion began to shift when Amy Foster released translated recordings of Kethvara children singing traditional songs. The melodies were hauntingly beautiful, and the lyrics spoke of heroes from distant stars who would come to help when all seemed lost. News broadcasts around the world played these songs, and people began to understand that the aliens were not so different from humans. They had families, hopes, and fears just like everyone on Earth. The technical challenges were enormous. Humanity's most advanced spacecraft could barely reach the outer planets of the solar system, and the Kethvara homeworld was dozens of light years away. However, the aliens had included detailed plans for faster-than-light travel in their message. Along with coordinates for supply caches they had hidden throughout space in case of emergency. Captain Alex Stone was chosen to command humanity's first interstellar mission. He was an experienced military officer who had served on space stations and lunar bases, but nothing had prepared him for the responsibility of representing all of humanity in a war between civilizations. His ship, the Aurora, was being retrofitted with alien technology by teams of engineers who were working around the clock to understand systems far beyond human capabilities. As preparations continued, more messages arrived from the Kethvara. Their situation was becoming desperate. The Devourers had begun attacking population centers on their homeworld, and millions of aliens were dying every day. The mechanical enemies seemed to learn from every battle, adapting their tactics to counter Kethvara defenses. Time was running out, and the aliens made it clear that if humanity was going to help, they needed to act soon. Lisa Martinez, who had first detected the alien signal, volunteered to join the mission as the communications specialist. She felt a personal responsibility to the Kethvara, knowing that she might be the only human who could properly interpret their messages during battle. As she prepared to leave Earth, she wondered if humanity was making the right choice, but every time she listened to those haunting alien songs, she knew they had to try. The construction yard above Earth's moon had never seen activity like this before. Engineer Maria Santos worked without stopping for days, converting mining equipment into weapons that could function in the vacuum of space. The Kethvara had sent detailed technical specifications, but adapting alien technology to work with human systems required constant creativity and problem-solving. Maria's team discovered that human manufacturing techniques, while less advanced than Kethvara biotechnology, were more flexible and could be modified quickly when needed. Ryan Brooks led the armor development team, trying to understand how to protect human ships against weapons they had never encountered. The Kethvara data described Devourer beam weapons that could cut through most known materials, but the aliens had learned that layered defenses worked better than single thick barriers. Ryan's team developed a composite armor system that used human ceramic technology combined with Kethvara energy-absorbing materials. The result was protection that could survive at least a few hits from enemy weapons. Dr. Kate Adams spent her time studying the biological information the Kethvara had transmitted about themselves. The aliens were tall and graceful, with bodies that seemed designed for a world with lower gravity than Earth. Their skin had a chitinous quality that could change color based on emotional states, and their large eyes could see wavelengths of light that humans could not detect. Most importantly for the mission, they seemed to share many emotional and social concepts with humans, including love for family members and willingness to sacrifice for others. The Aurora underwent modifications that changed it from an exploration vessel into humanity's first warship designed for interstellar combat. The ship's original crew of 50 was expanded to 200 volunteers for military services around the world. Peter Wright joined as the diplomatic specialist, responsible for maintaining communication with alien allies during the stress of battle. Commander Julia Ross brought tactical expertise from years of military planning, though she admitted that most human combat doctrine would need to be completely rethought for three-dimensional space warfare. Training for the mission presented unique challenges. The crew had to learn to operate in zero gravity for extended periods, something that was difficult even for experienced astronauts. They also had to master alien communication protocols and understand Kethvara technology well enough to maintain it during a long journey. Most challenging of all, they had to prepare mentally for the possibility that they might be humanity's only representatives in a galaxy full of intelligent life. As the Aurora neared completion, more urgent messages arrived from Kethvara space. The Devourers had accelerated their assault, and the alien defenders were being forced back to their final stronghold on the moon of Sectara. The mechanical enemies seemed to be learning from each battle, developing new tactics to counter Kethvara defenses. The aliens estimated they could hold out for perhaps 6 more months, but only if no new Devourer reinforcements arrived. Captain Stone made the difficult decision to launch earlier than planned, knowing that his ship and crew were not fully prepared, but understanding that delay might mean arriving too late to help anyone. The Aurora departed Earth orbit on a cold morning in March, watched by billions of people around the world. For the first time in human history, members of their species were leaving the solar system not to explore, but to fight for the survival of another civilization. The journey to Kethvara space would take 6 months even with their experimental faster-than-light drive. During the trip, the crew continued training and tried to understand more about their alien allies through the transmissions they received. The Kethvara sent detailed information about their culture, history, and technology. But what impressed the humans most were the personal messages from individual aliens expressing gratitude for humanity's decision to help. Lisa Martinez established regular communication schedules with Kethvara scientists and military leaders. Through these conversations, she learned that the aliens had been fighting the Devourers for over 300 years. The mechanical enemies had first appeared at the edge of Kethvara space as small scouting units, but they had grown stronger with each encounter. The Devourers seemed to learn from every battle, incorporating new technologies and tactics into their programming. What made the Devourers particularly terrifying was their single-minded focus on converting all biological matter into mechanical components. They did not negotiate, take prisoners, or show any interest in coexistence. Every planet they conquered was stripped of all organic life and transformed into a factory for producing more Devourer units. The Kethvara had watched dozens of other species disappear completely after Devourer contact. Commander Ross worked with Kethvara military advisors to develop new combat strategies that might be effective against an enemy that learned from every encounter. The key insight came from studying human military history, particularly battles where smaller forces had defeated larger enemies through unconventional tactics. The Devourers appeared to be excellent at adapting to predictable strategies, but they might struggle against the kind of chaotic, creative approaches that humans had used successfully throughout their history. 3 months into the journey, the Aurora encountered its first Kethvara supply cache. The alien depot was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, containing fuel, spare parts, and additional weapons that had been placed there decades earlier as an emergency measure. Captain Stone was amazed by the foresight and planning that the aliens had demonstrated, preparing for possibilities that might not occur for generations. The cache also contained the first physical examples of Kethvara biotechnology that humans had seen. Their tools and equipment seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, with smooth organic curves that felt warm to the touch. Dr. Adams discovered that many Kethvara devices could repair themselves and adapt to new functions when needed. The aliens had achieved a level of integration between biology and technology that humans had never imagined possible. As the Aurora continued toward its destination, the crew received increasingly desperate updates from the war zone. The Devourers had begun using new weapons that seemed specifically designed to counter Kethvara defenses. Several alien colonies had fallen completely, their populations either destroyed or converted into mechanical components. The final battle for Kethvara civilization was approaching, and humanity was still weeks away from being able to help. Captain Stone pushed the Aurora's engines beyond their designed limits, knowing that arriving a few days earlier might mean the difference between saving the Kethvara and finding only empty space where their civilization had once existed. The crew prepared for immediate combat upon arrival, understanding that they would have no time to rest or plan once they reached the war zone. The Aurora dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethvara system, and Captain Stone immediately understood why the aliens had been losing their war. Massive geometric shapes hung in space around the blue-green homeworld, their surfaces covered with weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. The Devourer ships looked like floating cities made of metal and circuits, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Between the mechanical monsters and the planet below, a small fleet of Kethvara vessels fought desperately to protect their world. The alien ships were beautiful in a way that took the human crew's breath away. They had organic curves and flowing lines that seemed to move like living creatures, their hulls shifting color as they maneuvered through space, but their beauty could not hide the fact that they were losing. Several Kethvara ships were already damaged, trailing atmosphere and debris as they tried to maintain their defensive positions. Admiral Zekthala, the Kethvara fleet commander, contacted the Aurora immediately after the human ship appeared. The alien's voice, filtered through translation software, carried emotions that needed no interpretation. Surprise, hope, and desperate gratitude filled every word as Zekthala welcomed the human reinforcements. The Admiral quickly shared tactical information about Devourer weapons and defenses, warning Captain Stone that the mechanical ships could adapt to new threats within minutes of first contact. Commander, Ross studied the battle patterns and realized that the Kethvara were fighting a defensive war against an enemy that grew stronger with every encounter. The aliens used sophisticated energy weapons and guided missiles, but the Devourers had learned to counter these attacks through advanced shielding and electronic warfare. What the mechanical ships had not encountered before were the crude but effective weapons that humans had developed for asteroid mining and planetary defense. The Aurora's rail guns fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds, using magnetic acceleration to launch metal slugs that could punch through armor without relying on energy shields or electronic guidance systems. When the first human salvo struck a Devourer ship, the mechanical vessel's response was clearly confused. Its defensive systems had been programmed to intercept missiles and deflect energy beams, but they had no protocols for dealing with simple chunks of metal traveling at relativistic speeds. Lieutenant Commander Sam Turner led the first squadron of human fighters into battle alongside Kethvara pilots, whose names translated roughly as singing wind over water and dancing light through leaves. The alien fighters moved with fluid grace, their biomechanical systems allowing them to change direction in ways that would have crushed human pilots. But the human ships had advantages of their own. They were smaller, faster, and more unpredictable than anything the Devourers had faced before. The battle quickly became chaotic as three different fighting styles clashed in the space around the Kethvara homeworld. The Devourers relied on calculated precision and overwhelming firepower, adapting their tactics based on logical analysis of enemy capabilities. The Kethvara fought with elegant coordination, their ships moving like schools of fish or flocks of birds. But the humans brought something entirely new to the conflict, creative chaos that followed no predictable patterns. Turner's fighter squadron used tactics that made no sense from a military standpoint but proved surprisingly effective against enemies that relied on logical prediction. They flew in seemingly random patterns, changed targets without warning, and used weapons in ways they were never designed for. When conventional missiles failed to penetrate Devourer defenses, the human pilots began ramming their empty missile pods into enemy sensors, temporarily blinding the mechanical ships. Chief Engineer Danny Clark watched the battle from the Aurora's bridge and proposed an idea that horrified the tactical staff but intrigued Captain Stone, the largest Devourer ship was positioned near an asteroid field that the Kethvara had been using for cover. Danny suggested using the Aurora's mining equipment to destabilize one of the larger asteroids, creating an artificial meteor shower that would force the enemy vessel to move or be damaged by debris. The plan required the Aurora to move dangerously, close to the Devourer fleet, exposing the human ship to concentrated enemy fire. But Captain Stone approved the mission, knowing that conventional attacks were having little effect on the mechanical giants. The Aurora's crew worked frantically to modify their mining lasers for military use, while Commander Ross coordinated with Kethvara ships to provide covering fire during the dangerous approach. As the Aurora closed with the asteroid field, Devourer weapons began targeting the human ship with devastating accuracy. The hybrid armor that Ryan Brooks had developed absorbed several direct hits, but warning alarms filled the bridge as critical systems began to fail. Maria Santos and her engineering team rerouted power and bypassed damaged circuits, keeping the ship functional through sheer determination and creative problem-solving. Danny Clark's mining team successfully destabilized a mountain-sized asteroid, sending millions of tons of rock tumbling toward the largest Devourer ship. The mechanical vessel's computers calculated the trajectory and began moving to avoid the impact. But they had not anticipated human creativity. The asteroid had been hollowed out and filled with conventional explosives that detonated when the rock was halfway to its target, creating a cloud of high-velocity fragments that no shield system could completely stop. The Devourer ship survived the bombardment, but its hull was damaged and several weapon systems were offline. More importantly, the mechanical fleet's tactical computers were struggling to develop countermeasures for attacks that violated every principle of logical warfare. How could they predict human behavior when humans themselves often acted on instinct, rather than careful calculation? The battle continued for 6 hours, with both sides taking heavy casualties. 2 Kethvara ships were destroyed when they attempted to protect the Aurora from concentrated Devourer fire, their crews sacrificing themselves to save their new human allies. The Aurora itself was badly damaged, with fires burning in 3 compartments and life support failing in the port section, but the tide was turning. Devourer ships that had seemed invincible at the beginning of the fight were showing signs of confusion and damage. Their adaptive programming was being overwhelmed by the need to counter tactics that changed faster than their computers could analyze. When Sam Turner's remaining fighters began using their own ships as projectiles, ejecting at the last moment and letting their empty fighters crash into Devourer sensors, the mechanical fleet finally began to retreat. Admiral Zekthala's voice filled the Aurora's bridge as the Devourer ships withdrew to the outer system. The Kethvara fleet commander expressed amazement at human tactics and gratitude for their sacrifice, but also warned that this had been only a scouting force. Intelligence reports indicated that the main Devourer armada was already approaching, with hundreds of ships that would arrive within weeks. Captain Stone surveyed the damage to his ship and crew, knowing that they had won an important victory but understanding that the real war was just beginning. The humans had proven that Devourer ships could be damaged and their tactics confused, but defeating a few dozen mechanical vessels was very different from stopping an invasion fleet that had conquered dozens of civilizations. Dr. Adams worked with Kethvara medical teams to treat human casualties, marveling at alien healing technology that seemed almost magical in its effectiveness. The aliens were equally impressed by human endurance and determination, noting that human crew members continued fighting even when injured in ways that would have incapacitated most species. As both fleets regrouped and planned for the larger battle to come, Lisa Martinez established communication with Earth to report on humanity's first interstellar combat. Her message would take years to reach home, but she wanted people to know that their representatives had honored humanity's commitment to help strangers in need, regardless of the cost. The temporary victory gave both fleets time to regroup and repair their damaged ships. But more importantly, it allowed proper first contact between the human and Kethvara crews. Dr. Kate Adams was among the first humans to board a Kethvara vessel, stepping into corridors that seemed grown rather than built. The alien ship's walls curved organically, and bioluminescent panels provided soft lighting that adjusted automatically to the comfort of whoever was present, the Kethvara crew. Members were even more impressive in person than they had appeared in transmissions. They moved with fluid grace, their chitinous skin shifting through subtle color changes that Kate learned indicated emotional states. Their large eyes were expressive and intelligent, and when they spoke, their voices had a musical quality that made human speech sound harsh by comparison. But despite their physical differences, Kate found that communication was surprisingly easy. The aliens seemed to understand human concepts of humor, friendship, and mutual respect. Admiral Zekthala personally welcomed the human delegation, expressing gratitude in ways that needed no translation. The Kethvara leader's skin displayed patterns of warm golden light that indicated deep appreciation, while gestures with elongated fingers conveyed respect for human courage in battle. Through careful translation, Zekthala explained that the Kethvara had studied many species throughout the galaxy, but none had ever volunteered to help strangers without expecting something in return. In the Kethvara laboratory sections, human engineers marveled at technology that seemed to blur the line between biology and machinery. Their computers were partially alive, growing new circuits as needed and healing damage automatically. Their weapons were cultivated in biotanks, developing targeting systems that learned from experience. Most impressive of all were their ships themselves, which could adapt their internal layout based on mission requirements and even seal hull breaches by growing new tissue over damaged areas. The Kethvara were equally fascinated by human technology, particularly the mechanical precision and modularity that allowed rapid repairs and modifications. Where alien systems were elegant and adaptive, human equipment was robust and reliable. A Kethvara engineer named Silent Pool Reflex Stars spent hours studying human armor design, noting how humans achieved protection through layered materials rather than the adaptive shielding that alien technology preferred. Commander Julia Ross worked closely with Kethvara tactical specialists to analyze the recent battle and prepare for the larger confrontation to come. The alien military leaders had extensive data on Devourer capabilities accumulated over 3 centuries of warfare. They explained that the mechanical enemies were not truly intelligent in the way that biological beings understood the concept. Instead, they were incredibly sophisticated programs designed to analyze, adapt, and conquer. The Devourers had originally been created by an unknown civilization as automated explorers, but their programming had evolved in unexpected ways. They had developed an imperative to convert all biological matter into mechanical components, viewing organic life as inefficient and chaotic. Over millions of years, they had consumed hundreds of worlds and assimilated dozens of different technologies, becoming more sophisticated with each conquest. What made the Devourers particularly dangerous was their ability to learn from every encounter. They recorded and analyzed every battle, every weapon, every tactic used against them. Their fleet computers shared this information instantly, ensuring that no strategy could be used successfully against them twice. This was why the Kethvara had been slowly losing their war despite having superior technology in many areas. The breakthrough in human Kethvara cooperation came when technician Bobby Chun and Silent Pool Reflex Stars began working together on armor improvements. Bobby's mechanical expertise combined with the aliens' biological engineering knowledge produced something neither species could have created alone. They developed living armor that could adapt to different weapon types while maintaining the protective qualities of human ceramic composites. The new armor consisted of multiple layers: a hard outer shell made from human materials, a middle section of adaptive Kethvara biomaterial that could redistribute energy from impacts, and an inner layer that monitored the wearer's health and provided medical support if needed. When tested against Devourer weapon simulations, the hybrid armor performed better than either species. Individual designs, news of humanity's intervention, spread throughout the galaxy as more refugee species learned that someone was finally fighting back against the Devourers. Ships began arriving from distant systems, carrying survivors from worlds that the mechanical enemies had already conquered. These refugees brought valuable intelligence about Devourer tactics and weaknesses, but they also brought sobering news about the true scale of the threat. The carrier ship Defiance arrived from Earth with additional human reinforcements, including squadrons of fighters piloted by volunteers like ace pilot Kelly Grant and her wingman Tony Rodriguez. Each human vessel had been upgraded with Kethvara biotechnology during the journey, creating hybrid ships that confused Devourer targeting systems. The mechanical enemies had detailed files on human and Kethvara technology individually, but they had no experience with the combinations that the Alliance was creating. Dr. Adams made another crucial discovery while studying Devourer remains from the previous battle. The mechanical units were not individually intelligent, but rather connected to a vast network that shared information and coordination across interstellar distances. This network was what allowed them to adapt so quickly to new threats, but it also represented a potential weakness. If the network could be disrupted or corrupted, individual Devourer units might become confused or ineffective. Lisa Martinez worked with both human and Kethvara communications specialists to understand how the Devourer network functioned. They discovered that the mechanical enemies used quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across vast distances, a technology that neither humans nor Kethvara had fully mastered. However, the network appeared to have limited bandwidth and might be vulnerable to certain types of interference. The alliance deepened as both species shared their most advanced technologies and military secrets. Humans provided manufacturing techniques that allowed rapid production of weapons and equipment, while the Kethvara offered energy systems that were far more efficient than anything Earth scientists had developed. The combination of human industrial capacity and Kethvara bioengineering began producing weapons and defenses that neither species could have created alone. Captain Stone received authorization from Earth for humanity's most desperate gambit. Yet, a direct assault on the Devourer factory worlds, using intelligence provided by refugee species about the locations of major mechanical production facilities. The plan was incredibly dangerous, requiring the combined fleet to travel deep into enemy territory and attack targets that were heavily defended. But if successful, it might disrupt Devourer production enough to give the galaxy's biological species a chance to organize effective resistance. Training for the mission required both species to learn new ways of fighting together. Human pilots practiced formation flying with Kethvara biofighters, learning to coordinate their chaotic tactics with the aliens' elegant maneuvers. Kethvara crews studied human damage control procedures, adapting their organic technology to work with mechanical repair systems. Most importantly, both species had to develop trust in each other's abilities and commitment to the mission. As the combined fleet prepared for departure, more ships arrived from other refugee species. The alliance was growing beyond just humans, and Kethvara, becoming a coalition of all biological life that refused to surrender to mechanical extinction. Each new species brought different technologies and perspectives, but they all shared a common determination to survive and protect their right to exist as living beings in a galaxy that seemed determined to convert them into machines. The combined fleet of biological species struck deep into Devourer territory, targeting the massive factory worlds where captured organic matter was converted into new mechanical units. The journey took weeks through space that had been empty of biological life for centuries, past the stripped remains of worlds that had once supported thriving civilizations. Captain Stone felt the weight of responsibility as he led humanity's contribution to what might be the galaxy's last chance for freedom. The factory worlds were unlike anything the Alliance forces had encountered before. Entire planets had been converted into geometric structures that stretched from core to surface, their surfaces covered with manufacturing complexes that glowed with industrial energy. Streams of raw materials flowed between orbital stations and surface facilities, while completed Devourer units moved in perfect formation toward staging areas, where they would join fleets bound for new conquests. The primary target was a world that intelligence reports identified as the central command nexus for the entire Devourer network. This facility coordinated production across dozens of factory worlds and directed the strategic planning for Devourer expansion throughout the galaxy. If the command nexus could be destroyed or disabled, it might create enough chaos in the mechanical network to give biological species time to organize effective resistance. The battle began with coordinated strikes on orbital defenses as human railguns and Kethvara bioweapons targeted the sensor arrays and communication stations that protected the factory world. The Devourers responded with devastating efficiency, launching clouds of automated defenders that moved like schools of metallic fish through space. But the Alliance had learned from previous encounters, using unpredictable tactics that confused enemy targeting systems. Kelly Grant led her fighter squadron in a desperate attack on the main orbital station, weaving between defensive fire while Kethvara pilots provided covering attacks that drew enemy attention. The human fighters were faster and more maneuverable than their alien allies, but the Kethvara ships could survive damage that would destroy human vessels. Working together, they created a chaotic battle environment that overwhelmed Devourer coordination systems. Tony Rodriguez and his wingmen discovered that Devourer defenses had a critical flaw. They were designed to counter logical attacks following predictable patterns. When human pilots began using their fighters in ways that violated basic tactical principles, the mechanical defenders struggled to respond effectively. Rodriguez began ramming his damaged fighter into enemy formations, ejecting at the last moment and letting momentum carry his ship into targets that were too heavily shielded for conventional weapons. The breakthrough came when Dr. Adams' research into Devourer communication networks provided the key to the Alliance's most desperate strategy. Lisa Martinez had developed a computer virus based on human creativity algorithms, chaotic programming that would introduce unpredictability into mechanical systems that relied on logical precision. The virus was designed to spread through the quantum communication network that connected all Devourer units, delivering the virus required, penetrating the heavily defended command nexus at the heart of the factory world. Kelly Grant and her Kethvara partner, Gentle Current Flows, volunteered for the suicide mission, knowing that their fighters would never survive the return journey. They fought their way through layers of automated defenses, their ships taking damage that should have been fatal but somehow continuing to function through a combination of human determination and Kethvara adaptive technology. The command nexus was a massive structure that stretched deep into the planet's core, its geometric surfaces covered with quantum transmitters that maintained contact with Devourer forces throughout the galaxy. Kelly and Gentle Current Flows crashed their fighters into the central communication array, manually uploading the virus into the network's primary data stream. The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit, but more importantly, it sent Lisa's chaotic algorithms racing through quantum channels to every Devourer unit in the galaxy. The virus did not destroy the mechanical forces, but it did something that the galaxy had never seen before. It made them unpredictable. Devourer units that had operated with perfect coordination for millions of years suddenly began making irrational decisions, pursuing artistic patterns instead of efficient tactics and questioning the fundamental programming that had driven their expansion across the stars. Some Devourer units began protecting biological life instead of destroying it, their corrupted programming interpreting organic beings as valuable rather than wasteful. Others became obsessed with creating beauty rather than mechanical precision, transforming factory worlds into strange artworks that served no logical purpose. The rigid network that had coordinated galactic conquest collapsed into millions of individual units following conflicting directives. The chaos spread faster than anyone had anticipated as Devourer or controlled worlds throughout the galaxy experienced system failures and programming conflicts. Planets that had been strip-mined for raw materials suddenly found their mechanical overseers, abandoning their posts or beginning restoration projects that made no sense from an efficiency standpoint. Biological refugees who had hidden in remote systems for generations emerged to find their former oppressors. Paralyzed by conflicting imperatives, Captain Stone received reports from across the galaxy as the quantum network that had maintained Devourer unity continued to degrade. The mechanical forces had not been destroyed, but they had lost the coordination and shared purpose that had made them unstoppable. Individual units were still dangerous, but they no longer operated as part of a unified intelligence dedicated to converting all biological matter into mechanical components. The war did not end with a single victory, but with a cascade of liberation. As species throughout the galaxy realized that the Devourer threat had been fundamentally altered, some mechanical units continued their original programming, but they were now outnumbered by biological forces that had learned to fight effectively against predictable enemies. Other Devourer units began cooperating with biological species, their corrupted programming making them protective rather than destructive. Admiral Zekthala coordinated relief efforts as Kethvara ships carried supplies and medical aid to worlds that had been under mechanical occupation for centuries. The aliens who had first reached out to humanity for help now found themselves at the center of a galactic alliance that included dozens of species. The Plea that had echoed through the stars had become a network of cooperation that spanned the galaxy. Dr. Adams established the first permanent research station where biological and mechanical intelligences could study each other safely. Many of the corrupted Devourer units retained their advanced technology and manufacturing capabilities, but their new programming made them interested in creation rather than destruction. The combination of biological creativity and mechanical precision began producing innovations that neither type of intelligence could have achieved alone. Lisa Martinez, now Director of Interspecies Relations, stood in the observation deck of humanity's first embassy ship, watching human children play with young Kethvara in specially designed habitat gardens. The galaxy had not become peaceful. There were still conflicts between species and regions where dangerous Devourer units continued their original programming. But the existential threat of mechanical extinction had been replaced by the normal challenges of a diverse, galactic community. The message that had started everything had been more than a plea for help. It had been an invitation for humanity to take its place among the stars as the galaxy's most unpredictable protectors. Human creativity and determination had provided the key to defeating an enemy that logical thinking could never overcome. Captain Stone's final log entry read simply that sometimes the best weapon against perfect logic was perfectly illogical. Compassion. The alien plea had indeed echoed through the stars, and humanity's answer had changed not just history, but the fundamental nature of what it meant to be alive in a vast, dangerous, and ultimately hopeful universe where biological and mechanical intelligences could coexist and learn from each other.